Hey there, everybody, and welcome to episode 9 of Animation Super Basics. Today, we're going to be focusing on shape layers. So let's take a look at what we're going to be creating. So today, we're going to be making this complex looking, but actually kind of simple animation using shape layers and some of the features that can be added to them. All right, so let's get started with it. All right, so first thing we're going to do to get started here is make a new composition. We're going to make this a square composition, so 1080 by 1080. This way, it's just going to make it easier to, when we add shapes and stuff, they're going to add right to the center. All right, so 30 frames per second, 10 seconds is fine, and we're going to hit OK. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is open up our rulers. If you don't, if they're not visible right now, you can go up to View and do Show Rulers, or hit Command R. And we're also going to want to turn on Show Guides and Lock Guides. All right, so let's go up into our ruler here and just click and drag to bring out a new guide. And we're just going to set that right down here. Oh, also, we're going to need to turn on our title action safe. So that's this little icon right here. I'm going to turn that on. That way we get this little crosshair so we can tell where the center is going to be. All right, so we're going to bring this first guide down to the bottom of this. And that's just going to be a guide for when we create our little triangle here. All right, so we're going to zoom in a bunch, grab our pen tool here, and we're going to click right in the center of this little crosshair. Boop. And right now you don't see anything. I'm going to hit Shift Command H to bring up our overlays. And now I'm going to maybe take a point here, add a guide, bring that to the center there. And I'm going to add a point here. And then another one down over here. And then close this off. All right, so it's a little lopsided, so let's grab this point, click on it, hold down Shift, and just bring it over. That looks about right. And for the fill, we're going to turn this to white. And for the stroke, we're actually going to turn that off. Hit OK. All right, so we have our little triangle here. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the layer. Now, our anchor point is actually in the center here, which is good, where we want it. So what we're going to start off by doing is actually naming this to triangle, plural. And we're going to go to Contents, Shape 1, and we're going to go to Transform Shape 1. So now we're going to go to about 10 frames in. We're going to set a scale keyframe and a position keyframe. All right. And for the scale, we're going to set this to 0. And position, we're going to leave that there for now. We're going to go to about 1 second here, and we're going to turn this up to 100. And the position, all right, so we're going to bring this up to this line right here. So we're going to take our position and pop it right there. Now we also want to add some rotation to this. Now if we select the rotation for this under Transform Shape 1, we rotate the actual shape. Now if we were to go to Transform down here and do rotation, we can actually rotate it around the center position. All right, so we're going to rotate this like so, maybe do 180. All right, set a keyframe, and we're going to bring that keyframe to the beginning right here. And then for this, we're going to type in 0. So now we have this triangle that kind of floats out. All right, so let's easy ease them. Keyframe assistant, easy ease. All right, so now we want to come back a few frames, maybe 4 or so. Make sure your keyframes aren't selected so you don't change all of them at once. And let's, at the end of this animation, we have the scale set to 100. We want to do a little bit of an overshoot. So we'll do like 120. Maybe a little bigger. 135. There we go. And for the rotation, we want to bring this down past 0 to like -16 or so. -24. And position, we also want to overshoot a bit. So for here, the position is at -410. So let's push this to we'll do up to this line. So -456, how about, for this example. All right. Now we're also going to go and we're going to let's hit Shift and R to bring up our rotation for the layer. And we're going to set a keyframe here. And we'll set this to maybe -180. All right, and then we're going to go to the end here. We're going to set this to 0, and then come back a few frames, and add our overshoot. And actually, let's rotate it the other way. Boop. 180. And this is going to go down into the negative. All right, so let's play this back. Yeah, that's pretty good. So we have that. So now what we want to do is close this off and then open it up again. And then now we have this little add option here. So we're going to click on that and we're going to go to repeater. That's where the fun part comes in. Let's close transform and open up the repeater. And let's open up the transform for the repeater. And under position, right away, we're going to change this to 0. So that way it starts off right here. And we want to work on the rotation. Now we want to have 3 copies and we want to make them kind of, evenly spaced. What we can do is do a little math here. 360 divided by 3 equals 120. Now all these layers will be equidistant. So now we have some more complex motion going on. All right, so that's our triangles. So let's click off of this layer. And now we're going to create an ellipse. So go to our ellipse tool and we can just double click. That way it will bring it right to the size of the frame and right in the center. And for fill, we're going to turn off the fill. And for stroke, we're going to do a solid stroke. And for the color, we'll do white. Maybe bring down the radius a little bit. And we're going to go to ellipse 1, ellipse path 1, and we're going to bring down the size. And we're just going to pop that right below our triangles. So we're going to call this one outer circle. All right, and what we can do is select our ellipse 1, hit Command D to duplicate it. So now we have 2. So let's go to the second one. And let's lower the size of that one. Maybe to right there. That looks fine. Maybe bump up the radius of the stroke a little bit, or width of the stroke. All right, so now we have our ellipse. Let's go into our ellipse 2 and go into stroke. And under dashes, we're going to click on this plus sign twice. That way we bring up our dash and gap. And first thing we're going to do is take this line cap and change it to round. Now we want our dashes to be longer, so we can adjust our gap to make sure that there is a gap, something like that. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add a trim path. Close all this, open up our trim path. Now what you can see is happening here. We can adjust the starting point and we can adjust the end. And actually, what I want to do is take this trim path and move it outside of our ellipse 2 so that it covers both of these circles. Open that back up, and now you can see that we can control both circles at the same time. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to open up the keyframes for our triangles by hitting U. And let's say as they start moving into position, so right here, let's set a keyframe for the end, set that to 0, and then maybe go 20 frames out, and then bring that to 100, and let's easy ease them. All right, so now we have that, and that's going to be it for that one. Let's open up the keyframes for that and click off of our circle layer. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a line here on a new shape layer. So we're going to click there and then shift click up there. And let's bring down the width. All right, so now we have this. And the anchor point is where we want it to be. So we're going to open up contents, shape 1, transform shape 1, and we're going to actually go to scale. Maybe open up the keyframes for here. Maybe right there, we're going to add a keyframe for the scale, unlink the dimensions, set the Y to 0, and we're going to come over to there, and we're going to make this 100. All right, easy ease them, F9. All right, so now we're going to add another repeater. So we're going to add repeater. And same thing, we want to go down to transform repeater and set the anchor point or the position to 0. And for copies, we want to make 180. So we have 180 copies. And what we want to do is after it reaches this position, we're going to set a rotation keyframe. And then go over here and set our rotation. So we're going to do 360 divided by 180. I mean, we know the answer to that, but so now we have 2. So a rotation of +2 will give us a perfect little circle of lines. Now for our end opacity, let's see what this does. We can turn that down. All right, so our outer circles rotate pretty much from in this direction. So we want to actually do the opposite. So for this rotation, we're actually gonna just add a minus sign in front of that 2. So now it goes the opposite direction. All right, easy ease them, F9. All right, so now we're gonna add one more layer, and that's gonna be a rounded rectangle. So let's double click on that to add it in there. All right, we're gonna call this one lines. All right, and then our new one that we just created, we're going to call this inner circle. All right, so now we're going to open up our rectangle 1, rectangle path 1, and let's bring down the size. Yeah, come on. Okay, for roundness, we're gonna bump this up until we get a perfect circle. So set this to 180. And that is the moment when it becomes a perfect circle. Let's open up the keyframes of our lines to see when they stop. So right here, and then maybe right before they stop, we're going to add a keyframe for the roundness and for the size. Also, what we want to do is set the fill to be a solid and turn the stroke off. Instead of doing that, you can also just push this down to 0. All right, so for roundness, we're going to move that keyframe over. And for roundness, we're going to set this to 0 when it first starts out. So it's actually a complete square. And size, let's bring this down to 0. And then for our last size, let's bring this up to maybe about there. And actually need to readjust the roundness. Maybe keep going with that. Let's see what this is looking like. Need to round it off a little bit more. There we go. How about that? And we're going to come back about 3 or 4 frames. And we're going to set the size. We're going to set the size to be something like that. And of course, easy ease all these keyframes. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add a new null object. And we're going to select all of our shape layers. And we're going to pick whip them to the null. And we'll call this out movement. Automatically updated there. All right, so out movement, we're going to hit S and R for scale and rotation. And let's say we'll come over to about 4 seconds here. Set keyframes for the scale and rotation. Then we're going to go to about 20 frames here. And rotation we'll set to 180 and scale to 0. Maybe bring this out a little bit more so that we can go a few frames in from the beginning. So the rotation's going in the positive and it starts at 0. So let's go to 0 for this keyframe and then go backwards to maybe about 15 degrees. And this was at 100. So let's bring this up for a little anticipation in our movement. All right, and let's easy ease the keyframes. And let's hit N, and let's see everything. All right, and we can real quickly add some color. We can go to Window, Extensions, Adobe Color Themes. Wait a million years for that to load up. Maybe go into Explore. And you could just browse, kind of peruse all these different color schemes here. Let's find a nice one that we can go with. Of course, the one I used originally isn't showing up. And I forget what it was called. All right, let's just use this top one. Just so we're not spending a whole lot of time just going through this. Let's maybe make these triangles that magenta-ish pink. Outer circles, we can change that to maybe darker. Hit OK. Lines. Let's make them that peachish color. And inner circle, let's select this orangish yellow. There we go. So now we have some kind of cool color scheme. All right, so as you can see, you can actually create some pretty complex animations just using some simple shape layers and a couple keyframes. Now I could go for hours on the different those different little modifiers that we can add. Like there's a lot of things that I didn't go through. The ones I use the most are repeater and trim paths. Occasionally maybe use wiggle paths and all that. I would go through all these and just see what they do. These actually add shapes. These add your like fills and strokes and stuff. And then these are the modifiers. So I would just go through and see what they all do. See how you can animate them and just go through and figure out what else you can do with them. All right, so the last thing we can do here is add some motion blur to everything. So just turn on our motion blur. If you don't see this little set of options, you can always hit toggle switches and modes, which we've gone through before. So you get to that, and now we have our motion blur on. If we play this back, all right, our simple little complex animation. All right, so basically, yeah, this was just to give you a few ideas of some of the things, just some of the things that you can do using shape layers and keyframes. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.